plays a huge role in our lives. It's often driven by some sort of emotional pain from the past. But what if we were not so afraid? What if we could set ourselves free from fear and open ourselves to new possibilities in life? Our guest today is the host of the Fearless Mindset podcast, and we're looking forward to talking to him. Don't go away. We will be right back.
You have a story that is unique, a story that needs to be heard, a story that people care about. So it can get them to stand up for what they believe in. It can inspire them to change. It can inspire them to take action. It can inspire them to care. Care enough to be the light to someone's darkness. Care enough to extend a helping hand to someone who's down and out. Care enough to call things the way they are and see them for what they could be. Your story can make a difference. Your story can save a life. Your story matters. One story changed the entire world. Your story could do the same. All you've got to do is own your story.
If you're just joining us, welcome. You are watching Books with Bridgetti. I'm your host, Bridgetti Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and I'd love to know where in the world you are joining us from. Today's live stream is made possible by StreamYard and BeLive Media. A very, very special, warm welcome to you if you are joining us and watching. We'd love to hear your comments or see your comments because this is an audience-centric show. So definitely are looking at the comments. We will not ignore you. If you are brand new to the show, please type in new in the comments and then I will acknowledge you and give you a shout out. Our special guest today is Mark Ledlow. Mark is a United States Marine Corps veteran. He is also the founder and owner of Ledlow Security Group and the host of the Fearless Mindset podcast. Oh, and also he's recovering from dental surgery, just in case. He titled his podcast in honor of his dad because he was fearless in his battle with brain cancer. Ledlow Security Group protects clients from bad and evil people, he says. And he says that what he basically does is what the Secret Service does for the president in the private sector. So let's not waste any more time and let's get Mark on the show, shall we? Very, very warm welcome to you. Great to have you join me.
Surgery. I feel like I got hit by Frank Mir in the UFC octagon.
Gotta love dental surgery, right?
I think it's still there.
I don't know a single person who loves dental work done. It's just not the best thing in the world.
And when the dental assistant says, I think he has acid reflux. I was like, oh no, what's going on with my body after they give me my nitrous oxide? I was spinning in circles, but I'm glad to join you today. I'm really happy to be here for you.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about what your day job is. You know, what do you do for fun? What pays the bills?
For me, I have been very fortunate. I've been very blessed. You know, I started this journey 15 years ago, and I ran into a guy that interviewed me for my first job in Southern California, a guy named Robert L. Dodge, who's a former president of G-Force Corporate Risk. And I got my break, and we call it the bodyguard world. You guys probably call it the bodyguard world. We call it the executive protection world. and 15 years of networking, business development, and just paying my dues, basically. Getting to know people in the industry, business development, networking, events, conferences, and then here I am now running Ledlow Security Group. And the day changes. It's like being an on-call doctor in the security services sector. You have clients like, for example, everybody's watching Portland, Oregon burn to the ground, and we're on call. Various companies call us, hey, can you support us with guys? Well, when all the guys are taken, there's no other guys or girls to help out. And so, a life in a day in my world is staffing for clients around the country, sometimes overseas. If hurricane disaster stuff, we've covered Hurricane, I think, Maria in Puerto Rico. We had 20 guys on the ground when that hit them. That was like 4 months of work with a lot of guys. But I'm on the phone, talking to clients, emailing clients, responding to clients. And someone said, you need to hire an operations director. I'm like, well, that costs money. And, it's always, I'm always thinking about making our money, the profit for the business. But it's a lot of it. It's advising our clients to make really good decisions about their culture, safety in their workplace, COVID-19 issues, making them feel safe in their environment. We have a couple direct clients in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and they're a very iconic political figure. That's all I can go into detail about that. And they have concerns, and that's a 7-day a week operation, and it's just on the phone with people, vetting different agents. We call them executive protection agents or security agents. You guys would call them bodyguards, and a lot of phone call. I'm doing HR stuff, vetting people, make sure they have state credentials so they can work in a state, and make sure they have background. Sometimes the client wants former military. Sometimes they want former law enforcement guys. And if it's a higher threat situation, maybe we're dealing with a cartel, by the California border. So they're going to want people that have that knowledge and experience in those environments. And so it's kind of 24/7. Sometimes it's, when we were handling Puerto Rico, 7 days a week. And I was taking care of my dad in the nursing home with brain cancer. And I was on the phone. My dad would be yelling at me. The caregivers would be taking care of my dad. And I'd be on the phone putting the fire out in Puerto Rico. And my dad goes, so Mark, what are we doing now? Where are we going? I'm like, I'm putting fires out in Puerto Rico. Dad is in his wheelchair in the nursing home. He wants to go see a movie. I'm like, I'm juggling all this stuff. But that was just my life for the last 4 years. And, I was taking care of Dad and his journey with brain cancer and running a business. It was very stressful. But now it's, the elections are over, and, high net worth families, they want to be protected. You have issues with LA now. Crime's skyrocketing in LA. Well, actually, crime's skyrocketing across the country, as you guys see on the news. I'm sure it's just gone nuts. And so, hence, wealthy people want the best security money can buy. And whether that's former Secret Service, whether it's Special Forces guys or military guys, it's a business going to be in demand. It's going to explode in the next 3 years. Is where our country is and where our world's at. So yeah, most of my time spent operationally, staffing projects for clients that call, vetting those agents, make sure they're legit, licensed, and have the right training. And use of force training is very imperative. And so we can do a good job of staffing for corporate demands, workplace violence when they get terminated. And now we're seeing, people are going back to workplace. Now we're seeing a ban by corporations demanding COVID-19 vaccinations. And some people saying, well, that's a violation of my HIPAA rights, HIPAA laws. And in the United States, it is. And so we're looking at that. And then possibly the employer could terminate the employee for not getting vaccinated. And so we're looking at legal issues there. And so the return to the workplace is going to probably blow up as far as security demands. And then as far as executives traveling from A to Z, we're going to see probably an uptick in that. I talked to Robert Dodge the other day. He's thinking 2022 is going to explode with security demand, security requests for these high-level C-suite level executives and above. So that's kind of what I see when I'm hearing from the ground and from the 40,000-foot elevation and below on security needs for a lot of people. And cyber threats too. Gina L. Osborne was just on my show a few months ago. I think that'll be airing in a couple of weeks. But she talked about cyber hacking, cyber security and the pipeline hacking. We're going to see a lot of that. And Wells Fargo, if you just read the news, they just got hacked, I believe, and so there's canceling all credit. So it's real. It's a real threat out there.
Mark, that's an interesting thing. I was talking to someone about this earlier. You know, have you seen an increase in cyber security issues since the onset of the pandemic? And do you think it's going to get even worse because the workforce is spread out all over the place? You know, I think to me, the biggest thing that happened with the pandemic happening as suddenly as it did, a lot of the multinational corporations didn't have systems in place where they could just easily send their workforce home. So you suddenly had a situation where people are now having to work on their private computers on a network that belongs to the company that they're employed by, but it's their private computer. You know, how do you deal with security issues in that kind of scenario? And there wasn't time for planning. You know, this kind of caught all of us off guard overnight, literally. You know, have you seen any sort of an uptake on security issues from that perspective? Because now their laptop at work may have had the necessary protection protocols in place, but their personal computer may not.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great question too, because not only were you working from the office at one point, and the office IT infrastructure was pretty well protected by their IT department and firewalls, but now we have a big problem with COVID-19. Everybody's working remotely from home. No, we're probably working from our personal laptop, logging in from our personal Windows.
Your own Wi-Fi at home. Your own Wi-Fi at home.
And those bad guys in the dark web are lurking around with their fishing hook in the worm, trying to find out where you are in your ISP. And yeah, that's a whole new set of problems. Now you have new risk, new huge vulnerabilities, and so you need to get the CP guys with the CPP credentials to do whole risk assessments and threat assessments on that. But that's millions of people sitting at home working from their laptop and logging into their probably corporate login site. And I'm sure the bad guys out there in the cyber world are looking for ways to jump in there. And you don't have the firewall protection from your modem and your Wi-Fi and all that's taking place from your house. So that's a whole new set of problems. So now you just went from one good layer of firewall from your corporation. Now you're at home with maybe one little firewall from your ISP, from your provider. And I'm sure the bad guys, and they could do their due diligence and find out who the executives are, and start trying to break into those firewalls that they have at their house. And that's a huge problem that COVID-19 blew up. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because after COVID-19, all these attacks just started blowing up. And even Gina L. Osborne, retired FBI agent, she was the head of the assistant to the cyber security task force, I believe, in LA. She was responsible for helping take down a whole situation with Sony. And she said, that pipeline on the East Coast was huge. That's billions of dollars of cost. And she told me on the podcast when we had her on that our biggest issue will not be a World War III of bloodshed and soldiers, but it's going to be many foreign entities, whether that's Russia, China, colluding with each other. They have people give their full-time job is to break in IT infrastructure. And she said it's going to be trillions of dollars in losses. If I'm a bad guy, I'm looking at how to financially crush an economy in the United States or any other country for that matter. So that's going to be definitely a new thing. And the problem is too, there's not enough workers out there because we have a worker shortage, and it's a very specific niche type of trade with lots of specific type of schooling. And so I think it's going to be problematic, but it's going to be demanding a lot of money in that position to be paid for those type of skill sets.
It's a very interesting concept that we're now moving into, essentially the weaponization of technology.
That is true. And the bad guys knew how to hit us hardest. America was the leading world power, but now you're seeing a shift with China. They want to play in Africa. You guys are becoming a major player now, and you're seeing a lot of shifts. And you have the cartel. Nobody talks about the cartel, but the cartel is very sophisticated in their organizations too. And so I'm hearing they may be associated with that. And I have guys in the intel world that do deep digs into the dark web, and they work for other government agencies. I can't say which, but they're seeing an uptick too. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that a lot of people just live in a bubble, and they just they hope it go away.
So I want to segue into the times that we're living into now with COVID. It has thrown us into a world where we're filled with fear because there's so much unknowns. We never know when things are going to change. There's the goalposts keep shifting. I spoke to someone just recently. The US has been opening up a lot more than the rest of the world, but at any given time, we don't know. Things may shift the other way, and you may go right down into lockdown again. We've seen that happen in Australia, in New Zealand. They opened all the way up because they had 0 cases. And at the drop of a hat, they found themselves having to close right up again because the cases started surging. And that can happen in the US. We're in the third wave in South Africa. We're seeing Delta is out of control. So things can change at the drop of the hat, and it causes anxiety. It causes us to live in, constantly looking over our shoulders. Sometimes we don't even realize how high our anxiety levels are. Our stress levels have increased significantly. So how do we manage that? And how does that translate into developing a fearless mindset? Is it possible to have a fearless mindset given the set of circumstances that life has given us with COVID?
Yeah, you're right. That's a good question. And the answer for me was my input. What type of input did I have daily? Am I listening to the news? Am I watching too much news? Where am I getting my information from? Is it misinformation? We don't know. We really don't know if it's coming from, Europe, overseas, or is it coming from China, Russia? We don't know. And for me, what I did, the best thing I could have done was I got busy. I just turned it off. I turned off that input. I turned off that hose of input of negativity. Yeah, it exists and all that. But you know what? For me, I launched my podcast during it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to let this stop me from living my life. I think my advice was, invest in myself. I started doing walks. I started walking. I started talking to my friends, and I started coordinating and strategizing, my next year. I started making plans for the next 6 months to a year during that time. I'm not going to let some virus scare me. Heck, I'm a Marine. I've seen worse. my drill instructors, the Marine Corps, were scarier than a virus. Yeah, the virus is very deadly. I don't discount what it's done to the world. True, but a lot of it's psychological too. And I just chose for me to not live in fear. After watching my dad deal with cancer, I'm like, I can't live in fear. I need to live my best life now. I'm not promised.
So tell me a little bit about your dad, what happened to him, and how that led to you starting the Fearless Mindset podcast. If you can just tell us a little bit about your dad's situation.
Yeah, he was a background. He was a sales guy, business guy. He was in the hearing aid business for a long time. He loved it. He loved helping people, and he was a Vietnam veteran in the Navy. And those Vietnam vets, they just have a different mindset. They're just strong-minded, and nothing gets them down. And Dad just lived like each day as if it was her last day. He was the most outgoing guy. He knew everybody by their name. He just wanted to have fun, laugh, giggle, and have a blast. And he said, "Hey, Mark, what are we doing today?" Every day we're going somewhere. So the caregivers would go, "Mark, do you guys realize that your dad's gone more than he's here? He just sleeps here, then you're gone for the rest of the day?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Because you know what? That's pretty special. It's like, "Hey, Mark, I'm hungry. Let's go to Sizzler." "Oh, Mark, let's go to the coast." We could take off. I'd load him up in his wheelchair. We take off, go to the coast. Hey, I'm bored. Let's go to the movie. And he just had a blast. Yeah, he had brain cancer. He knew, the diagnosis that he'd be dying, but he enjoyed every moment and every day, every hour, every minute. He just made it the best. And then, when he lived it life, like he had hope and he had that light of knowing where he was going. He had a Christian faith, and so that kept him going. He was also a pastor, so he had an eternal hope, and that's what catapulted him till his last breath. And I was like, okay, I saw that, I watched that, I'm like, holy crap! And people they were baffled by his peace about his journey. He just embraced it. He didn't fight it. He embraced the journey that he had with cancer because his hope is huge. Hope is here, but you have to remember, fear is paper thin. And so when I decided to launch the podcast, I'm like, you know what? Fear is paralyzed everybody with COVID-19. Everybody's worried about paying their rent. Everybody's worried about paying their bills, food on the table. They don't know if they're going to get kicked out of their home because they don't have any money coming in because they can't work. And so I'm like, how can I help people have hope? How can I help people get over fear? So I figured, you know what? What would Dad do? He'd make it a party. He'd make life a party. That's how Dad was. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bring in some of the most powerful people in the world I can connect with and have them tell their story on my show. And the whole idea was, initially to get business contracts in the security, but it's become something much greater than I could have ever imagined because I'm having people tell their story, from FBI agents, CIA agents, Michael Trott, who helped me start this thing, to Frank Muir, two-time world heavyweight champion, a fighter, professional athlete. I've had, everybody on the show that's they have the same message of hope, overcoming fear and adversity. We all have fear. We all have things
Absolutely.
we go through. We all have things we fight internally. You just get a diagnosis. You may have some sort of cancer, skin cancer, or some sort of rare disease. But life has no mercy. Life doesn't care. And it's up to 90% of how we react is right here. It's all about input. All about input. The input, positive input,
Absolutely.
it gives us that
Totally
drive.
agree.
So
What were one of the most inspirational stories that you've covered so far in the Fearless Mindset podcast? If you can, I don't
yeah,
know.
I recently had a guy who was locked up in prison. He was a shot caller for the cartel, and he's out. He's out of prison and all that, so he's fine. But for him to tell the audience, we had on the show a few weeks ago, and I said, I asked him basically, hey, how many kills have you had on your record? I'm like, you know what? That's his past life. He's in a new life. He goes, I'd rather not talk about that. I'd rather talk about where I am now and how I love living life. I have hope now. I have God in my life. He didn't know religion, and for him, his hope was God. He found the Lord. And so that was the most. Guy went from prison to now having no hope and being threatened by the cartel, the Mexican mafia, organized crime from Mexico. His family is threatened, and now he's living a life and working with prisoners and stuff. And that was probably the most inspirational podcast I've ever had. And I think the next one was sitting in the den of Frank Muir at his house, the trophy room, with his daughter Bella. And Frank Muir has been a fighter all his life, but I've never seen so much adoration from a family and his kids to their father like they did. Frank's kids love Frank. They adore him. They respect him. And Frank is the nicest guy on the planet, the most humble guy on the planet. But you get him into his world, fighting world, he's an animal. He's a beast. But his kids love him and adore him and respect him. And I sat down there and talked to Bella. Bella, his oldest daughter, just turned 18, in her professional fighting career. And who knows what she's going to do, but she just admires her dad. And she is her father's daughter. And it's just the discipline, the drive, the ambition that Frank and his family have. It's just, I've never seen it before. It's very rare you see that type of dedication in sports and athletics. And Frank's a smart businessman, very smart businessman. He's got a lot going on over there in Vegas. But I think Bella probably made the second biggest impression on me, just on her humility that her father instilled into her at a very young age, becoming an upcoming, major fighter in the world.
That is amazing. That is amazing. It's crazy how when you start talking to people and sharing your experiences, it encourages other people to talk. And there's just this whole wave of inspiration if you would only just open up and welcome those stories. People love talking about their experiences, but you've got to ask.
You have to ask.
And you have to ask them. And I think I think the fact that you started this podcast during the pandemic is amazing, because we all can do with a bit of inspiration and good news. There's enough bad news out there. And I think that what you and I do in this space, with being able to live stream from a place where we have no agenda other than wanting to do good in this world.
Yeah, I mean, that's because we get so much negativity from the news, and that's why the podcast segment is blowing up right now, exploding so much, because nobody trusts the news they're getting, whether you're liberal, conservative, whatever. I was in the Marine Corps, so politics, like a buddy of mine, Robert Lamb, said on my podcast, when a politician's open their mouth, they're probably lying, is what he said. And for me, I get more peace doing this podcasting, listen to other people's story. I get so much nourishment, like not spiritual nourishment, but I get, my tank gets full when I'm hearing people's story about overcoming adversity and what they did and overcoming those challenges, and surrounding yourself with like-minded people. Power of association, John Maxwell, on how to overcome. Leading by example. John Maxwell is the number one leadership author in the world, and there's so much to be learned from. You can go on different platforms like Clubhouse. That's how I met Linda. She's the lady that's writing this book that I'm going to be writing a chapter in. And it's just people are doing great positive things for the world, and people need this. People are looking. That's why people are filling up Clubhouses, and that's why Spotify is blowing up so much, because people are tired of hearing that negative crap, that negative garbage. They don't want to hear it anymore. And that's why these news networks ratings are plummeting. People are tired of it. People are
Absolutely.
tired. People are tired of the government trying to control your brain, and they're sick of it. I'm a Marine. I'm sick of it. I just want to live my life.
there's as much as the pandemic has brought us, additional stress and all kinds of complications. A lot of us have lost friends and family to COVID, and that's added another layer of stress. Not being able to say goodbye to our loved ones in the manner that we're accustomed to, having that sort of mourning and huddling together with families. That's been tough for people, having to do funerals via Zoom. It's not the way that we normally grieve and handle or process loss. And so I think giving people this opportunity to be able to talk, and live streaming is unlike anything else. It's not like traditional broadcasting, because traditional broadcasting is just one way. Whereas here, we can invite people to join into the conversation if they want to. They can ask questions. You can participate. It's and we talk about stuff that people can relate to.
Right.
People can relate to your story. They can relate to my story. They can relate to the stories of the people that you have on the Fearless podcast. So that is why I think it has drawn such a huge audience. And so Linda's writing this book. It's amazing, this journey that she's been on over this last couple of years, because she started off with writing The Year of Fears, where she wrote about she aimed to overcome a fear a day for an entire year. I really take my hat off to her for undertaking that journey. And now she's one of the books that that you are co-authoring with her is called The Fearless Entrepreneurs. What made you want to write or be a part of this book?
For me, I just wanted to give, her following hope from my story, my journey with my dad and what he went through and how I overcame my adversity of, grieving, losing yourself. Just you lose your identity. I lost myself after he passed away. I'm like, first question I asked myself, who am I? What am I doing? What is my purpose living in life? Where am I going? What am I doing? That went on for about a year. You had that cloud. I call it the cloud of grieving. You're just surrounded by a cloud, and it just takes about almost a year and a half, and all of a sudden you break. It's almost like you break through the fog, and you're in that jet flying over the ocean, and you just see that fog, and all of a sudden, boom, you see the island, you see Hawaii, and that's kind of where I was for about a year. And you have to allow yourself to grieve, and I figured, you know what, maybe that would be a great idea to tell my story, just to empower people. It's going to be okay. You will get through terminal illness. You will overcome. It's part of life. That's how you approach it. It's your input. It's your association. It's who you lifts you up during those tough times. And the biggest thing you do going through crisis is being alone. You need your family, your friends. You got to have people around you. And the best way to, I felt for me, the best way to get through this the fastest was serve other people who are suffering what you've gone through. Because that's the best way to restore your soul is by serving other people that need to hear your story.
Mark, I couldn't agree more. I live with chronic pain myself, and I did for a while, to be honest. I really did for a while hide out. That's all I wanted to do. I became a bit of a recluse, and because when you live with chronic pain and you're always canceling appointments, people stop making appointments with you. And I got comfortable being by myself. I really did, until one day I realized I really need to snap out of this and stop feeling so sorry for myself. And that's how I got into live streaming. I found a course, a community cause I could get behind. And I used that to catapult me through my fear of being live on camera, because it was not something about me. It was something I could do for my community. And that allowed me to push through this fear of speaking on camera to the world. It's like, who does that? It's pretty uncomfortable and scary to suddenly go from being in your obscure little world, hiding out, to putting yourself in front of a camera where the entire world gets to know you. And that was pretty scary. I have to admit, it was very, very scary coming out of a situation where I was not being social, and now I'm being almost too social.
You're having fun.
It was very scary, but focusing on not myself, focusing on serving others, I believe is what often has helped me. And I recommend that to anyone that's going through a hard time, because it's a mind shift. If you're not serving others, what are you doing? You're feeding your negativity, is what you're doing all day long.
Yeah, for me, it was like you said, it was getting over myself. My first 10 podcasts, I was a nervous wreck. I'm naturally an introvert. I'm not an extrovert naturally. And that
Which doesn't make sense for the work that you do, right? It's just
yeah, I had to reprogram my brain for 4 months. I mean, I had to go talk to myself before I even got on camera, because I can remember sweating talking to Mike Trott on my first podcast. I was shaking. I literally shaking. And then I had Frank Mir on. I'm like, I'm like talking like this. I'm like, Mark, calm down, relax. It's going to be okay. That is not going to hurt you. That camera there,
it's not going to bite
survive.
you.
Frank Mir is not going to put you in a headlock and kill you. He's just talking to you, and it was just you have to. That was fear. That was fear talking to me in that camera. And I'm like, Mark, is that camera worse than the Marine Corps drill instructor? No. Chill out, breathe. That was my first 10 episodes. Now you can tell I'm used to it. But the key thing for success is repetition, practice, practice, practice. 10,000 hours to success. How many times did Michael Jordan lose games? He was kicked out of high school basketball. They dropped him out of college. Now he's a 6-time world champion because he practiced routine. His daily habits gave him success. Like you, practice, routine. That'll give you success. But people are afraid of the process to get the reward. And most people, 99% of the people out there, they're afraid to take the risk because they're afraid of their own shadow of fear. And that's why people don't do much in life. The people that are fearless, like Elon Musk, I mean, the guy's fearless. Michael Jordan, fearless. Tom Brady, fearless.
And what makes them different from you and I? If you really think about it, what makes them any different from you and I? Not much.
Mental.
If it's mental. If they could find a way of becoming fearless, so can you, so can I, so can the next person, because we all have the same capacity. The one is not. We're not more of a human than the next person. So if one person can do it, it means you can do it if you fix this.
And I think too many people right now in our society are too digitalized by their brain. They're controlled by their digital media. The first thing they get up, social media, Facebook, Instagram. They spend hours doing that. That's input. How much do you read a day? Probably nothing, because they're tied up. You only have 8 hours a day to work, and then you spend the rest of those 8 hours on social media. That's your input. And I have to challenge people to spend less time on social media and interact with your family. Have dinner with your family, your mom and dad.
Talk to people, real people.
And that's going to be your key to success to get through this COVID-19, this mental breakdown we're having. Don't watch the news. Turn the news off. It doesn't do any good. You can't control what you can't control. Control what you can control. That's my advice. That's what I've been doing. I maybe watch an hour of news because I have to know kind of what's going on in the security world to have an idea, for risk and threat assessments and intel reports. I need enough for that. Otherwise, I'm busy doing my stuff. I got my podcast. I got 3 recordings a day. You've had 3 recordings a day. But get yourself busy. Master your calendar. Master your week. Don't let life master you, because if you allow life to master you, you're going to be mentally broke. You're not going to be worth anything to anybody.
I mean, you don't want to put your head in the sand like an ostrich, and not be aware of what's happening in your surroundings, but you don't want to become so immersed in the news that to the extent that it paralyzes you, or that it robs you of your joy and causes you undue stress and fear, because that doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve your family to do that. It does serve you to empower yourself and to shift from being fearful to being fearless, because that is what's going to set you free. How did your dad develop that kind of mindset, if I may ask?
He was always stubborn. He was a Vietnam vet, and they're stubborn. But you have to be stubborn. He was very regimented. My dad would actually cold call. He'd get the phone book out. He'd go down the A through Z every year in the phone book. The phone book guys, if you're new, young, they used to publish it, have everybody's phone records of the landlines in that thing called the phone book. They call it the yellow pages. I mean, that's
Right.
a few years past. But Dad would actually cold call and try to get people to come to his business for a hearing test. He'd go 2 hours a day, calling people blindly every night, and he was fearless.
Wow.
And reaching. And he'd make good money doing it. He sold hearing aids to people, and that was his routine. And then he loved serving the community. He worked in the missions. He was very religious, and he was all very spiritual, and so that was part of his life. And he would be doing that, and then he'd get gatherings together to do like sings of 50 music and all that. He'd love to be around people. And if I learned anything from my dad, is serving. And he didn't worry about his problems. He didn't really allow his problems to get to him. He just did his daily habits, daily routines. And his success was hidden in his daily routines. Read a book, read a book by a successful entrepreneur. People that I know that I mentored with that are very successful, they have daily habits. And those daily habits is listen to a podcast from a self-made multimillionaire. Read a book by an author who's very successful. The best way to get in the head of a multimillionaire is read their books. How many people read anymore? I personally hate reading, but I have to do audio downloads because I can listen better because I have dyslexia sometimes, and I start falling asleep literally when I read. And I have Extreme Ownership by Jocko. Love the book. And I have one right here by John C. Maxwell, number one leadership author in the world. And if you put that input in your head and start developing yourself, personal growth, and start daily habits to get to where you want to go versus get off the news. That's not going to help you be successful down the road. The news won't help you. But personal growth, go to business conference. I go to security industry business conferences to network. And I used to be a corporate guy, 10 years in corporate America. I was the number one producer for Washington Mutual. And I have that business development background. That's why I'm so successful in the security side, because I took that knowledge from the corporate world into the private sector and business. And that's what gave me the skill set to be successful. But everything is in your daily habits. Everything's in your daily habits. I'll finish with this one piece. A mentor once told me, show me your mentors and coach, and I'll show you your future. Who do you listen to?
I think that is absolutely excellent. Because it's a good reflection of where you are at. If you want to just take stock of what you are doing. So, Mark, I think that is a great note to wrap up on. Do you have any final thoughts before we end?
Yeah, my final thoughts is thank you for having me on this show, and shout out to Linda West, who's writing this book, Fearless Entrepreneurs. Definitely pick that up when it's published. I'll be in the last chapter in memory of Terry Ledlow. But if I can say one thing, you are who you associate with, and don't let your friends bring you down. Social media, what does it really do? Does it really give you money in your bank account? Probably not, unless you're, working a company doing, challenges and stuff like that. That helps. But you are who you associate with. And say if you're in a bad marriage, say in your bad relationship, let's say you're in a domestic disturbance abuse and you're a woman trying to get out of a bad relationship, the guy's abusing you. You only get one shot at this thing called life. And you have the power. You have the power to get out of that relationship. You just got to believe in yourself. And don't believe that false story. That's not true. And for the guys out there, our military brothers who are dealing with PTSD and suicide, there is help out there. There's tons of military guys, organizations that can help you with suicide issues. If you're having suicidal thoughts and you don't feel your life is worthy, you are worthy. You're worthy of greatness. So believe that. So that's my last bit of information there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. Much appreciated. Glad you could take part in the conversation. Mark, thank you so much. And I think also just a shout out to Linda and the Fearless Entrepreneurs. Looking forward to that book coming out. I think it launches somewhere in August, is it? July or August?
I think, yeah. I think they're doing editing around the 10th. But yeah, I think you're right. I have to double check with Linda on that one.
Absolutely. So Linda Sunshine West, giving you a shout out. All the best with the launch of the Fearless Entrepreneurs.
Oh, my website. If you want to reach my podcast, it's www.fearlessmindsetpodcast.com. Or you can go iHeartRadio, Mark Ledlow, YouTube, Mark Ledlow, and please download it. We have some great speaker guests coming on to the show. We're booked until September. And if you're looking for me to be a keynote speaker or something like that, email me at mark@ledlowsecurity.com. And I'm at Instagram, Fearless Mindset Podcast. So, yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate your time.
Mark, thanks very much. And thanks for the inspiration to everyone. And just a big shout out to our audience for having joined us today. Mark, take care. Stay well. All the best. And I look forward to reading your chapter in the Fearless Entrepreneurs. Which chapter are you writing, by the way?
The last one.
The last one. Okay. Awesome. So everyone, have a look out for the book. It's definitely going to be available on Amazon. Absolutely. And look out for Mark's final chapter in The Fearless Entrepreneurs by Linda Sunshine West. So with that, it's goodbye from me in Cape Town. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
almost 3 billion people and counting are consuming video content on their devices. BeLive Media helps brands position their products and services to people at a time and manner that's convenient to them. If you would like to reach your customers and clients and stay ahead of your competitors, then connect with us.